like to welcome you to the 54th round of VV Gaming's The Losers Bracket. And as always, we've got a jam-packed show. Really cool interview coming up later on in this episode. But first, we're going to start off with some VV Gaming news. Let's get right to it. Call of Duty. We've got VV Relent with us here today. Relent, what is going on in the world of VVV Call of Duty?
Well, in Call of Duty, we have the 25K ladder playoffs going on. We just got done playing against IGC Pro in the winners bracket round 4. We won 3-2. And on Wednesday, we played Optic in the winners bracket round 5.
So, Relent, tell me, where does that put us? If we win on Wednesday, where are we?
We would be 2 games away from playing in the winners bracket finals.
What do you think the toughest team is ahead? Is it going to be Optic Gaming?
Optic Gaming and IGC Influence are probably our top 2 right now, since Envious Blue has been knocked down into the losers bracket.
You've been spending a lot of time with the team recently. You've been monitoring their scrims. You've been in their games. What have you learned about them? Who are the characters? What are the things that make you laugh? Tell the audience a little bit about the team.
Well, everybody on the team is really outgoing. We're always joking with each other, having fun. When someone goes big, we're all going crazy, just keeping everybody hype, keeping everybody in the game, and we're just having fun. Everybody has their own little attitude and personality, and it all comes together really nice.
I want you to pass on to all of us here. Good luck to the team on their match against Optic, and we look forward to hearing how we're doing next week.
Good luck, motivation!
Absolutely. All right, with that being said, this brings us to Halo Reach. And for Halo Reach, we have someone very special. Jason, who do we have today to talk about Halo Reach?
Man, this has been a long time coming, but please welcome back to the Losers Bracket for the first time in, quite a few months, Justin Sabu. You would know him as VVV Spikemouth. How have you been, buddy?
It's been a long couple of months, I'll tell you that, but I'm glad to be back finally. It's been forever. I've been looking forward to it.
So before we get back into the world of Halo, first things first, I do want to say we're really glad to have you back. Tell us what's been going on with you, and then also afterwards, get us into some Halo news. What's going on in the world of Halo?
Well, I had a big family change, so I had broken up with my girlfriend and moved back to my parents' house, and in that I had to establish myself again with a job and everything. It took me a couple months to get back into it, but I'm finally back now, and picked up gaming right where I left off, and actually picked up StarCraft 2 and been trying to learn that, and along with trying to play Halo and continue to play Pokemon at the same time. It's been a long couple of months trying to do that and figure out my life at the same time, but now I'm back trying to find myself a good team for the opener in Dallas, and hopefully place in the top 8 this year.
Awesome. Really good to hear that you bounced back. So to everybody out there listening, you can break up with your girlfriend, you can move back home, you can hit the reset switch, and life goes on. Correct, Justin?
Exactly. It'll take some time, but, it can be done.
Awesome. All right, well, let's talk about Halo Reach. We just had the Dr. Pepper ladder end, didn't we?
That is true, and the finals ended up being Darkest Hour versus Sicker Than Your Average. And right off the bat, I want to say congratulations to Darkest Hour for winning the tournament. They came in strong. Nobody thought they were really going to do well, especially after dropping 2 of their players to pick up Nated and Legit. And they came into this tournament and really set a standard for these teams. Like, they just wiped the floor with everyone they played. And then especially in the finals, where Darkest Hour had met Sicker Than Your Average originally a few rounds back and beat them 3-1. So this was kind of a big match for them. It was great that it was being streamed. They had over 1,000-something people following it. But the issue that I had was that the way Sicker Than Your Average approached the finals was really disrespectful, and they weren't professional at all about it. All they did was talk crap. They blamed hosts. They were actually racist.
Let's back this up, because a lot of people may not have any idea. So set the stage for us. Here we are. This is an online finals. Who was streaming?
Yes, what it came down to was Lethal from Sicker Than Your Average has a GTV, and he said, okay, well, we're going to stream the entire ladder every match we play. Well, they ended up streaming the finals. They showed it from Lethal's point of view, and you could hear everyone's voice except for Darkest Hour, because they had the other team muted and stuff like that. You didn't actually really, at first it was looking like it was going to go well, and then you started hearing the racist comments by Sicker Than Your Average and them complaining about connections and, a ton of other things go on, and it just shows how unprofessional of a team they actually are and how inexperienced they are in the league. They came out and they've won a couple combines. They've done well in the combines. But this is the first time at a pro level where they've had to actually show their professionalism because now they are technically considered a pro team for the first event. And with that, they threw that out of the water, and it was just ridiculous of how they approached it. And a lot of pro players actually dislike the way they approached it and don't like the way, anything about them now.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that you'll hear Sundance say, and one, culture of the MLG League is you can sort of be as intense of a competitor as you want, but at the end of the day, you kind of shake hands and say good games. But there's a limit with that. Racism is a big turnoff, and what's funny is when somebody starts losing, you immediately know what they always do. And obviously, as soon as things started turning, the kind of true colors came out.
And that's exactly true. And seeing how the two teams approached it, because after there was a huge Twitter battle going on between a lot of the pro players and stuff like that. But the one thing that really started it was after the game, Sicker Than Your Average coach, Cheeky, went on and was talking about, oh, well, Goofy has an amazing host and they only lost because of host and stuff like that. That's all good and all. You can come up with that excuse if you want, but it obviously shows that the better team won because as much as people want to complain about host, deep down, I mean, skill can overcome host anytime. And, Sicker Than Your Average had proved that at, combines and stuff, but this is their first opportunity to play against a pro team to show how they were going to do. And they obviously didn't perform as well as people thought they were going to. And to go on with the Twitter battle afterwards, Darkest Hour approached it really professional. They gloated for a bit. Obviously, they just won $5,000, so they were really excited about that. But what actually sparked my interest after was Clutch from Dynasty had actually brought up a point that Legit and Nated weren't considered professional anymore. So it was interesting to see how Darkest Hour approached going into this tournament with only 2 amateur players. Now, after the long battle, talking about how Legit and Nated are or were not pro by the end of Halo 3, Legit came up with an interesting comment saying that I don't need MLG's stamp of approval to let me know I'm a pro player. From that point of view, after he said that, it made sense because you look at what someone like Legit or Nated has accomplished throughout their career, I'm pretty sure they don't need that stamp of approval to let them know that they are considered a pro player.
You bring up an interesting point because, I think that term pro player, I think at the end that gets thrown around a lot. And this is all systemic because of the point system. If you took the point system away, and I was having this discussion with somebody else, we were trying to talk about what are ways to fix the Halo seeding problem, and I said, what they really should do is they should total up every player's lifetime achievement, how much they've gotten from stipends and from prize money, and just rank the teams that way. Just add up how much the team has actually won or received from Major League Gaming, and that then determines what the seeding is. And if you haven't won a dime, then you just go right back into the random pool. And that will add credibility to the professionalism, to me. I think, in a lot of ways, I do agree with this perspective. You don't need, because of the point system or the rules, a stamp of quote-unquote professional in order to be considered a professional gamer. Not at the level of someone like Legit or Nated.
Their experienced players have been through MLG events throughout MLG, and I'd rather have an experienced player over a pro player any day.
This is exactly true. And, one thing that kind of sparked everyone's interest because, myself and Mazik were watching the stream. And what sparked our interest was Lethal's mom was talking on the JTV chat, talking about how Darkest Hour should move over because there's a better team, in line now for first place. But the thing is, it's like, okay, rather than, sitting here trying to talk all this crap about Darkest Hour and how bad they are, why don't you let them prove it in the game? And we obviously saw who the better person was because, yes, although Sicker Than Your Average won the first game of that finals, after all the gloating they did after that win and how racist they were being about Goofy and stuff like that, Darkest Hour came out and easily 3-0'd him after that. And not to mention, Lethal's mom was trying to hit on all the people in the chat. So, right there, one, I'd be embarrassed if I was Lethal. And 2, now they look like crap because how unprofessional they were in the beginning, and then they just get dominated by a team like Darkest Hour.
Hold on. The mom was hitting on kids?
Yeah, it was kind of awkward, honestly, being in that chat because Lethal's mom was, trying to hit on all the kids and talking about how she's going to be at the first event and stuff like that. I was like, if I was Lethal right now seeing this, I'd be very embarrassed.
What? Wait. How was she hitting on the people in the chat?
She was talking about how she's like a cougar. She goes for younger guys and stuff like that. It was bad. And Mazik was there, and he just couldn't take it anymore. He had to say something, and he started getting a lot of crap for trying to stick up for pro players and how they were approaching the situation and stuff like that. nobody ever sees it that way. You know, you always have these kids now that are going to be the fan of a certain team, and they're not going to look at it any other way. And that's what was going on in the chat, honestly.
Can we back that up again? So his mom was in the channel talking about how she's a cougar. Is that right?
Yeah, and like, yeah, she was trying to get all the kids to go along with it and stuff like that, and how she's going to be at the first event and meet all these kids. I was like, this is just awkward. I was like, this is supposed to be a finals.
I agree. What does she look like?
Yeah. Here's my thoughts on this. There's no reason for us to back this up when she's obviously doing enough backing up for all of us, right?
Exactly.
Touche, sir. Touche.
But, you know, like I said, it was really good to see how Darkest Hour approached it. You can tell who's the professional team out of the two, because Darkest Hour went about it, you know, yeah, you know, you win a tournament, you're going to gloat for a little bit, but it's not going to be like trash talking the other team. You know, they said they're good games and everything, and they went about their day. But the way Sickers and Your Average approach it, you can tell they're not going to be around for long because of how they approach things.
And you could honestly say that maybe the trash talking that SYA was talking fired up Darkest Hour a little bit and really backfired.
Exactly. And the only thing Sickers and Your Average ever saw was that they were the best at combines. Well, that's just it. You know, all they played against were the amateur teams. Yes, there were some pro teams that came into the exhibition in Dallas, but that's the thing. They only had like 2.5 weeks to prepare. Like the new game in 2.5 weeks, you're not going to do that well. You know, most of those teams did place in the top 8, like Darkest Hour. They did still place top 8 and got themselves a seed. So for the 2.5 weeks they had, they were really good about it. Now, Sickers and Your Average, now they're starting to realize that a lot of these pro teams are catching up to them and surpassing them, like Darkest Hour. They're going to really find out that they're going to struggle come the first event because these teams have caught up.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the big reasons is Sicker Than Your Average, while all individually talented, may not work together well as good as, obviously, these pro teams. These pro teams are coming up with strategies, working on them, and really going about Halo Reach in a different way than probably a lot of these teams that are just individually skilled are doing.
And that's exactly true. You know, I'm friends with their coach, Cheeky, and I never see them playing too much. Like, I'll see them run matchmaking and stuff, but very rare do I see them scrimming or even associating their coach in any way to set up any type of strategy. I'm reading on Twitter now, all these pro teams are starting to get together, like Final Boss and stuff like that. They're coming up with just starting strategies now, and then they're going to work on other things. I think 60-year average is trying to jump the gun a little bit, thinking that they are the best right now, but they're going to find out quickly that they're going to get run over if that's the case.
Well, I want to thank you a lot. Welcome back, Justin. Can we ask you to come back next week?
Oh, I sure will.
Can we ask you to bring Lethal's mom for commentary next week as well?
I don't know if we would want that, but so I guess we could try.
What are we going to have a new segment on the show called Cougar's Corner? Is that what we're going to do?
I love it.
No Cougar's Corner, though, Jolly. We're not going to do that. Although, the shout out to Kraft Dinner. Is Kraft Dinner a cougar hunter?
No, he's a big girl hunter. He went home with
he's gonna hate you for that comment.
He's
you know that.
He's a chubby chaser.
All right, well, let's move on to not at all chubby, VVV Noxie. Michael, welcome. How are you?
Very good. How are you guys doing?
Awesome. So tell us, what is new in the world of StarCraft? Why don't we start with VVV, and then we'll talk about the bigger picture. So tell us, how we doing?
So, well, in VVV, we had a match Tuesday night in the ESCA Clan League where we pretty much dominated our opponent, Dynamic Gaming. All of our players that played were Murder, Time, Allage, and Angry, and all of them won 2-0 in their respectable matches. So that puts us in a really good place. I think we've only lost 2 matches at all in ESCA so far, but this is a really big week for VVV Gaming. In fact, today we're going to be having 2 clan wars. One is for the SCL, and if we win, I'm pretty sure we clinch playoffs, and that's going to be against Team 1, 7 p.m. Eastern. And then at 10:30 Eastern, we'll be playing FXO. It's going to be casted by DJ Wheat, as it is the clan war of the month.
So we made the clan war of the month, did we?
That's what we were told by ESCA.
Well, good. That's good to hear. And glad to hear that DJ Wheat's going to be casting it. That should be really entertaining. Let's turn the clock back, though. Last week, we got slapped by Idra, 4-0. Talk about what we learned from that experience.
Well, Idra's a really good player. He plays a lot, and we definitely had him at times, but just we weren't able to, finish the game outright when we could have beaten him. I'm glad that EG played him. we don't get the chance to really play him on ladder or anything like that. So it really goes for good practice. I don't think it really hurt us as much as it did help us as far as like what we need to be ready to go up against, especially going into the playoffs and stuff like that.
Test server has the new maps, is that right?
Yes, it does.
And that appears to be, I think a lot of people are really hopeful that we're going to get better maps, because I think even the South Koreans have complained. I mean, I think everybody is saying we need better competitive maps. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think a lot of the reason why people want new maps, one, because the ones that we kind of have now are already showing their age because they've been around since beta. But I think people will see the balance of the game shift based on how the maps are made. And so I think everyone kind of just wants to see what's going to happen if maps are bigger, what's going to happen if maps have less ledges, what's going to happen if, maps are still small or there's closer positions, stuff like that. And I think, we need to explore all of those things before we actually start patching the game.
So other people are saying, let's wait until we get the new maps and then decide how to patch the game?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's well, we're not really letting the game evolve. The game is released. It's not beta anymore. And I think some people are in the mindset of oh, we need to make changes to it. Oh, this isn't balanced. This isn't balanced. Well, any race can take wins off of another race. Maps are kind of where certain races have advantages. And I think that's why people want to see new maps to see, well, okay, who's going to have an advantage here? So does this make this, more plausible? Does Terran have an 80% chance on one map, or is it closer to 60-40 kind of thing?
Some people would say that some of the maps we have now make it really easy for kind of cheese strats to happen. And if we had slightly larger maps, or hopefully some other maps, that we could maybe reduce that. What do you feel about that?
Cheese will always be a prominent strategy. I don't think it's going to make it go away. I think it's going to make it even more riskier. It may even make it just harder to scout. Whatever it does, cheese will still work as long as it's executed. I don't think that the map size really will hurt or help. I think that the games will definitely get longer, and I think the more skilled players, because of the larger map sizes, will be able to show up even a lot more. I don't think they're going to lose as much. I think that they feel a little bit contained because the map is so small and they're so close to their opponent.
I think if I were Major League Gaming right now, having longer matches would make me concerned, because obviously MLG is on a very tight time schedule. So I'm sure MLG, when the new maps come out, will consider very carefully what they do allow and not allow based on the time to complete.
That sounds pretty accurate. I don't think that it's going to be a major difference. There's games already that go fairly long. It's kind of based on the player's play style and what their strategy is going into the game. But like I said, some of those cheese and all-in builds will kind of diminish as the maps get a little bit bigger, and they're probably not going to get huge or anything like that. But I think it will definitely change, really quick games from happening.
Well, Noxie, I want to thank you so much for being on the show, and wish everybody good luck from us, okay?
Will do. Thank you.
About 2 weeks ago, an article appeared online called Addicted to Venture Capital. It was an article written about MLG, and if you haven't checked it out yet, we'll have a link to it in this week's podcast thread. Please check it out. This week we have the author of the article, Chris Schetter, joining us. Chris, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
So, Chris, for the listeners that do not know who you are, please, can you give everyone a little bit of your background, who you are, and then what made you decide to write this article?
Sure. I have been around competitive gaming since probably about 2004, 2005-ish. As some of the folks that have read the article and commented on it have rightly deduced, I'm from the PC side of things more than the console side of things. Started out as a Counter-Strike pubber and Battlefield 1942 pubber. Played both of those competitively off and on for a little while, and got into the whole world of content production, which is basically where I've made my home doing shoutcasting and that sort of stuff. Decided to start writing opinion pieces and try to do what reporting I possibly could. I didn't have as rosy of an outlook on everything that was going on then, and I guess to a point going on now than other folks. That's why I started writing, and I wanted to see if anybody else felt the same or if I was just crazy.
Well, Chris, give us a little bit of what the reaction to your article has been, both negative and positive.
Well, it's been interesting, to say the least. Writing it wasn't one of those things that I felt was going to get any particular reaction at all, really. When I saw some of the discussion threads that had kicked off as a result and some of the things that were being written there, it puzzled me because, it was just one of those things where I write an opinion piece once every few weeks or so for ESFI, and it didn't seem to me to be that contentious of a topic. So when I took what the reaction was and put it alongside what I'd written and looked at it from some different points of view, I can understand it. That's not to say I agreed with everything that was being said, but there were some valid points. And I had written a follow-up, and that's how you guys actually came to contact me, because Jerry had left a post on my blog and said, I think he appreciated the follow-up and suggested I had posted around, but I wasn't really interested in pursuing that discussion on kind of a blow-by-blow basis everywhere, all over the internet, all at the same time. It's kind of why I started writing just on my blog and also on a limited basis at ESFI, because I found that it was easier to actually get a more constructive discussion going when it wasn't just in a general anonymous public forum.
So MLG DC was your first and only MLG event, is that correct?
Yeah, and I just want to make a distinction about that as purely a spectator and not as a participant. I haven't actually been a player in anything on even like a non-paid amateur league basis for some years now. So yeah, I was there purely to see what was going on.
I personally went to MLGDC myself, and that was the first one that I've ever attended. And I was wondering if I could get some of your kind of like initial reaction, some of the things that you kind of saw and liked or didn't like, and just kind of find out your point of view.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. I decided, because I'm local to DC, having an MLG event come locally, I made every attempt I could to at least spend about an hour out there just to check out what's going on, because prior to that, the only experience I had with it were just reading an article here and there about it, and from time to time popping open a live stream just to see what was going on. Obviously my interest in gaming has actually aligned with what's been going on at MLG until recently when they picked up StarCraft 2, and I played quite a bit of that. But in any case, so I showed up to check out what was going on, and I actually had worked nearby because it was at the Gaylord National in National Harbor, and I worked for a company whose offices were also in that National Harbor complex. And I had been in there in that resort a few times just to check it out, and it was easy to find where the MLG event was. So that was all good. I was kind of surprised to be able to walk in for free. Nobody even bothered to stop me or anything. I could just walk in and check it out. Yeah, I wasn't really sure why there wasn't a spectator charge. But yeah, generally, I found it strange that there weren't as many pure spectators as I really expected or had hoped to have been there. A lot of people that were milling about the floor seemed to be really there as participants, or if they were there not to play, they were actually kind of friends and family of players. And that's all good and great and grand and everything, but at the same time, like, I felt kind of out of place being just some guy that was there walking around. There was some Halo going on the main stage, I remember, when I was there, and I was only there for about an hour because that's really all the time I had to check it out. But I watched some Halo there. There was no commentary going on, and not being a Halo player was kind of, I couldn't really easily grasp it. And I walked over to where the StarCraft tournament was going on, and I had taken up a position in the back, and there was this giant glob of people, and most of them were sitting on the floor. They were watching a big screen, and you could barely, I wasn't actually sure if there was commentary going on until I heard some of DJ Wheat's pretty distinctive vowels come flying over the crowd. So I could tell that there was some commentary going on, and probably the folks up front could hear it pretty well, but I was way back because there was probably about 300, 400 people watching the match that was going on. And then I sauntered over to where the Smash was going on and where Tekken was going on. And there were some folks playing, but I couldn't really tell if there were actually matches going on because there weren't a lot of people spectating some of these things that were being played, or if it was just people there messing around on free consoles. So all in all, it appeared that the competition side of things, which is where a lot of leagues go wrong. They have very poorly managed competitions. It seemed like, just from my outsider's point of view, then that was very well managed, that there was a referee on just about every match that was going on that I could see in the Halo area. There was obviously that going on the main stage and also in the StarCraft 2 area. Everything was being very well officiated, and it seemed like things were moving along on a pretty good pace. From a spectator point of view, where I was not there to play but just watch what was going on, found it very confusing. I wasn't really sure when things were going to start and if anything else was going on the main stage, as well as, what was going on in general in the StarCraft 2 competition. It could be that I just missed a giant board or something, but I couldn't find that either. And the Smash and Tekken areas were just, I couldn't grasp what was going on there at all.
I want to jump in with a quick follow-up to one of the things you said.
Yeah.
Let's say you were to go to a baseball game or a football game, and you didn't know much about baseball or football. Would you have more or less tools available to help you understand the game?
That's a pretty good question. It's a great question.
I was going to say, the reason I asked this is because I think, and I noticed this in the MLG forums, I think over the last couple of years, what has sort of happened is, and I get this a lot, there's sort of this experience. I call it like, here was competitive gaming, esports, it peaks, CGS happens, and there's this, the bottom sort of drops out, at least to the expectations of the esports fans at that time. And Major League Gaming, in many ways, was all Halo. It was, in many ways, marginalized by a lot of PC gamers. So, in many ways, and having been an organization who started with Gears of War on the MLG Pro circuit and now has grown into all, a dozen different titles, along the way, breaking into the PC world has been our most difficult challenge, only because I find the attitude has always been, well, if you didn't play 1.6, if you aren't aware of this past or a part of it, if you aren't the status quo, then, in some ways you haven't earned your chops or you don't count. And I think in a lot of ways, when I listen to critiques about Major League Gaming, I sometimes have to ask, do PC gamers come into this arena with a chip on their shoulder? Is there still some paradigm of PC gaming should have conquered all? Why is console gaming here? Is any of that at play?
No, I understand that. Not with me. I wouldn't deny that exists because it does. There are a lot of people that put a lot of their eggs in the CPL and the CGS basket and got pretty torched for it. Just for instance, there's an article in the New York Times back a few years ago about one such gamer that was, in the CGS and doing really well, and then when it shuttered, now he's working, nights at Home Depot, I think.
It was Sam's Club. I remember the article.
Yeah, or some big box, right?
But, that's interesting because I've always thought here, and this is another thing I don't quite get. I've heard that term thrown a lot too. Put all the eggs in one basket and the sort of bottom falls out, but I don't see the damage done. Like, so let's say I invested all this time and energy in CGS and it fails. In the business world, failure happens all the time. I mean, trial and error is what makes America America. You're going to try something, it's going to fail, and then you try something different. I guess if you could help me understand what was the real damage done, except for maybe expectations being disappointed. I never saw the damage.
No, I'd love to actually address that. Okay, so when the CGS came onto the scene and opened up, a lot of the big PC gaming team brands that existed at that point, the CGS actually bought their brand, their intellectual property, whatever they did own.
To be fair, they sold it.
That's true. They did sell it.
I mean, they decided that this was going to be a good financial opportunity. They made that choice.
Absolutely. And this is part of it, is that when things went south, it was as if once the CGS was gone, that like a big part of the upper echelon of the scene that a lot of other participants, had looked up to as icons like 3D. And eventually Jason Lake was able to get the Complexity brand back in some shape or form. But it wasn't just the brands there. It was also the players. Once like everything just went down with very little warning. I mean, it was literally just like everything was cool and operations were running. DJ Wheat was producing shows on the web, the week before they had shuttered up, and then it was just gone. It was more a psychological blow to those players that were in it and thought that this was going to turn into something long term. And then when it just evaporated, they left. And a lot of the players that were pillars and icons in the scene quit. When that sort of thing happens, I mean, the damage wasn't just like, okay, there isn't this television show anymore. There isn't this X amount of money coming into these teams that are playing. It was that this whole chunk of the scene that was playing at a very high level and that a lot of people aspired to play against and play with was gone. That was really a major setback for those games that was played, but particularly Counter-Strike in the States took a really, really major hit just because of the talent drain that when that all went down.
This is one of the things that had always interested me because we were told two things when we wanted to get into this space. You have to do Halo and you have to do Counter-Strike 1.6. And I said, thank you. Those are the two things we're not going to do. And we didn't. And the reason being is because people were doing it. I would say the savvy investor, the savvy business person looks at the peripheral where there's opportunity and then drives their way to the center. It's less expensive. You have more time for trial and error. And when you sort of emerge on the stage of the center, you get to come with a great deal of experience and fan base. That's why we approach it that way. And to me, as someone who isn't affected at all by what happened with CGS or the damage it did to the 1.6 community by draining all those players into Source and then obviously its failure and people quitting, is that I've never quite understood why there's a lasting bitterness. It would seem to me that it was fantastic that happened, and it's always sad when businesses fail and some talent goes into different industries. Others never, they sort of, people lose their drive, but someone will always come around and pick that up and sort of move the ball forward. Like, that down is over. CGS was sort of the first down, and that's where the play ended. Now the next phase comes in, and it looks like Major League Gaming. What I don't understand is why there's so much of that animosity from PC gamers toward MLG and toward console gaming as a whole, because to me, console gaming makes brilliant sense, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if you want me to try and justify that point of view, I can't, because I don't hold it. It's not why I wrote the article. If that's what you're ultimately getting at as well.
No, not at all. I mean, it's going to eliminate that as a possible cause.
No, I mean, I don't subscribe to that sort of thing either. I mean, as I also said, gaming is gaming, and whether you do it on a cell phone or a Nintendo DS or a console or a PC, what separates all that is minutia. Whatever form it takes doesn't particularly matter to me as long as it's sustainable and it works for gamers, ultimately. But also, to get back to the storyline there, leading up to CGS, I mean, it wasn't just the CGS, if we're being honest. It was also things that were happening where, in the years prior, where it was clear that things that appeared to be very much on the up and up were really just massive money grabs, had turned from community-oriented sorts of endeavors where it seemed like the gamers were being respected and prize money was being paid and everything was pretty hunky-dory. That soon turned into rumors of shady stuff flying around and kids not starting to get paid the prize money they were promised, all sorts of stuff along that vector where it was just incrementally things were getting worse and worse, even though the outward projection from the leagues at those times were growing exponentially, and look at this $1 million prize pot we just hit. Look at this world tour we're putting on. And, each of those things failed kind of domino-like. And I don't know if you've read into the whole drama-filled story behind all that. It's all up on Complexity's website.
You're talking about CPL and Angel and all that, right?
And the WSVG and Scott Valencia and all that noise. So, I mean, it wasn't just necessarily that, it was partially that when the CGS came onto the scene, that also put the final nail in the coffin of these other things going on that, while on the outside looked relatively healthy, on the inside weren't healthy at all. And then, nobody really knew about it until the crap hit the fan, so to speak.
And Chris, if I can real quick, to put this into context, Enron, Lehman Brothers, this happens all the time in the business world.
Sure does.
And I always feel that, like, gamers, because many of them, not you, but I think it's fair to say many of them, are fairly naive.
Oh, yeah.
And,
it's why I write.
And again, I understand the disappointment, but I will tell you that most PC gamer types I know don't like Major League Gaming, and they will this year because StarCraft will be on there, and the prize is actually equal to Halo per player all season, and then actually I think it's 50,000 is what the sort of championship prize is going to be, which would be more than Halo per person. So that should probably get them to come around and feel better. But
yeah,
even when I look at there's this, and I'm not sure where the cynicism comes from, but there's this like real edge. I've had Loaded Gaming when they were still around say, you don't know anything, you don't get esports, you're an idiot, and then all of a sudden, bam, they evaporate. It's like,
they're gone. Yeah.
Why
they get
does
bought
that,
up? Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I always try to figure out, where is that edge from? Like, why is it? Do you have to be part of this old guard to be cool? And you like, if you haven't survived CGS's failure, and if you're not, then you can't break in. You follow what I'm saying?
Oh, I follow what you're saying, and I think what you're speaking to is absolutely real. The only stab I can take at that is that the first big thing to come up in team gaming, really, in the States, was all centered around Counter-Strike 1.6. There was a large contingency of people in that sector that thought that what they had was the beginning of a new sport, and that all they had to do was hitch their wagon to this rocket and ride it, and that they would be forever known as the pioneers of a new sport. You can really see this if you look back into stuff that was written on GotFrag and look back at stuff that was written on other esports websites, the sort of overimportance that people tended to place on themselves when they were part of that crew. They thought they were onto something, and everybody else was late to the party. And I think that's where that cynicism comes, because that was a tough bubble for a lot of people to have popped, if you know what I mean. And it's also that, a lot of those folks are the type that they thought that this was the big thing in their lives that was going to actually make them somebody. They were somebody in this scene. And then when everything went to crap, they realized that they weren't actually somebody anyway. To put it into really basic, boil it down to the bottom line. I'm probably being more crude with that language than I really should be. Not that I'm excusing it, because I think it's silly, but there is where I think you'll find the root of the cynicism towards anything else in this sector that is going on, that is enjoying any sort of modicum of success. Whether that's on console or not is inconsequential, I think, but it's an easy place to draw a line.
I agree a lot with what Chris is saying. I come from an old PC background myself. I mean, all the way back in the days of the PGL and Quake 1 tournaments, and I agree. A lot of people saw the future and knew that this was going to be something huge one day. And I think everyone thought it was going to happen a lot faster than it ended up happening. And I think where you get, and I agree with what Jerry's saying, there is an inherent cynicism and negativity in the old PC community, because I think a lot of us, almost like if a potential draft pick suddenly found out tomorrow, hey, the NFL is shutting down for 3 years, you missed your shot. Your time came and it's gone. And I think Yeah, and I think that's what happened with PC gamers is PC gaming dominated the scene 10 years. There was no tournaments for like legitimate tournaments online because there was no Xbox Live, there was no PS3, there's none of
there
this
was no
stuff.
online scene for it. Yeah.
So we dominated it. We took a shot at it, and I think everybody felt like we blew it. And when we felt like we blew it, everyone knew, if you wanted to tell someone 10 years ago you wanted to be a pro gamer, it's get a job, Grouch. What are you talking about, buddy? That's ridiculous. So it felt bad for a lot of people that took a shot at it because it was a big "I told you so" from all the naysayers. And I think you have like a whole generation of gamers that felt really let down. And I don't want to say screwed over because they weren't screwed over, but I think they just kind of felt like all the people that were pointing at them saying you can't make a career out of gaming. It's never going to be professional. It's never going to be an organized league. I feel like it was a big slap in the face to everyone that had believed in it and hoped for it for so long. And then when it fell apart and you have the rise of the console coming at the same time, I think a lot of people realize they're just going to have to politely bow out and that, it wasn't going to happen the way that they envisioned it happening.
I think you're right. I think another symptom of this, I mean, I'm still seeing it today, really, within the PC scene itself, still, is that there are still some people that are hanging around that were also a part of the people that were doing content production at that time, doing shoutcasting and things like that, that basically thought they either invented commentary, essentially, or what they did was the pinnacle of commentary and that everything else that comes after it is just absolute crap. It's the same sort of thing where people are going to reminisce about the glory days, and this generation just doesn't know what good stuff is. I think that's, another half of it. There's definitely some cynicism there. I think it'll fade in time. And for the time being, we just need to hope that some cooler heads can prevail. It kind of leads back to the article that I wrote and the subsequent reaction is that a lot of it was just, oh, this PC troll is just trying to troll us, troll face. And like, that wasn't really the point of my article. Like, I'm not trying to troll anybody. I was just voicing a concern that I thought was legitimate and wanted to generate some discussion on.
I got to be honest, everything you've said so far, personally, I've agreed with. I think that MLG, and I've said it before, I think MLG needs to focus more on spectators and making it more viable to a larger community than just those that are going to the events to game. I think that my first impression, if I hadn't had the community that I had, would have been very similar to yours. A little bit of confusion, not knowing what's going on, not a whole lot for me to watch or understand or get involved in. And we've talked about that before, but the real bright spot for me, and like I said, I'm a cynic and I come from a PC background, was I think how open to ideas and change MLG is. And they tend to really, really, I mean, obviously merging StarCraft 2 was a huge, huge move to bridge the gap and divide between PC and console. And I'm really excited to see what direction they go in because they seem to be listening and getting the picture.
And if I can, it wasn't always that way. I mean, the history of Major League Gaming, we've had MLG Clap on the show and talked a little about early days, but when we came around in 2007, MLG was anything but friendly.
Sure.
When you take venture capital money, when you take institutional money, there's often a feeling that you want an experienced executive to lead it. And I mean, when they took the money from Oak Investment, the Oak Investment put Matt Bromberg in as the CEO, and he came from AOL. He didn't get it. I mean, He got the business aspect of it. People can say what they want, but he was looking to sell it. I mean, I think that's what any investor wants, is they want their money back.
Yeah.
And Sundance will admit this, he's a very straight shooter. That's what I respect about Sundance. He said, I got a little lazy. I kind of lost control of it in a way, and I wanted it back because it wasn't going where I wanted.
Yeah.
And, we had written an open letter and, all of a sudden the ice broke and Sundance came back to the community and he listens to people and he talks to individual bloggers. He talks to, we probably are the largest community that attends the events and, follows this. But I'm certain that he treats the bloggers with the same respect and gives them the time of day that he does us. And I think that's fantastic. He doesn't publicly treat someone who might just be a blogger, someone trying to generate content, with less respect than he does me or anybody who in some ways may have put a lot of their own money into this. So, I think in a lot of ways change is coming. And I really think the increase in the prize to equal Halo and StarCraft, that in itself speaks a lot. But I think this institutional money and venture capital sort of begetting venture capital, let's talk a little bit about what your concern was. Because I think what I'm hearing, if I understand what Matt just said, is that the kind of concern goes like this. You've seen things fail before. You'd really like to see a model that you can understand be sustainable and profitable. And when you keep seeing venture capital money poured in, you feel very uncomfortable. Like, you know what, this could all go away too.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to sum up what I was at least trying to go for. I guess I didn't quite communicate it quite well.
I think it probably was that you called it a circus. They probably really felt a lot.
Yeah.
If we could always take our words back, trust me. No, that's nothing wrong with.
No. I'd actually.
I love the circus.
I would leave it if given.
That's fair.
Given another chance.
That's okay. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't. I've said you got to throw some stones sometimes, and it gets people to dialogue, and that's good. And I think that's why we wanted to have you on the show, is because it's good to throw stones and it's good to hear about your perspective. But let's talk a little bit about your concern about seeing more venture capital being put in versus the model. What your central concern is.
Well, first regarding my traveling circus quip. I tossed that out there not as commentary on quality of the streams or the quality of the events or anything. It was merely a commentary on the structure of the events, in that they set up temporarily in a town for a weekend and then they pack up and move on to the next town. That was all I was trying to say with that comment. So hopefully that explains that. Anyway, regarding my qualms with how much venture capital MLG has been bringing in, I know I'm not like a doctorate in business or I'm not a Nobel laureate in economics. So I'm also just trying to understand all this just as much as anybody else who would try to be digging on it. From what I've read, venture capital is a very interesting realm to be in terms of gaining investments. And from what I understand, you're going after venture capital when you're in a sort of business that doesn't operate along typical things that you would go to a bank and ask for a business loan for. It's something very unique, something maybe kind of out there that requires a certain type of person that wants to, that A, has some cash to burn, B, can understand what you're going at and can really picture what you're dreaming just as much as you can. So it's a particular type of relationship, and there's some statistic like out of all the companies that go after VC in the United States and pitch to VC, out of all the pitches that get made, there's some single-digit fractional, a percentage of pitches that actually get taken action on. So, it's one of those things where it says that there's somebody with a lot of money that can share your vision, that wants to invest in your vision. And it's pretty high risk, and it may or may not turn out, but we're going to give it a shot. It's just the nature of those things. Regarding the amount and the frequency of getting venture capital, it seems to be generally the case that the more you take in, the harder it is to get more, to a point. There's a few rounds where it's like, okay, you get your seed money and you're off. And you're going to try your business model out, and maybe you need a little more cash, so you're going to get some more venture capital, and you're going to keep moving. And then maybe you haven't grown as much as you'd like, and so you get some more, up until the point where there's also rounds where you're closer to going public, or you're getting closer to actually selling the company, and so you need some more capital in order to facilitate all that. So there are different kinds of rounds of venture capital and qualities to it. But generally, the further you get into the amount that you're taking in and the number of rounds that you're actually going after, the harder it becomes to procure more and more funds. And if it becomes a necessity, and whether it's actually a necessity that MLG needed money to keep moving was a bit of speculation on my part. I'll admit that. But at the same time, you generally don't go after more cash unless you actually need it.
Here's my perspective. Most of what you said about venture capital, I will agree with. I don't think I would disagree with anything as a general statement.
Okay.
But I think it needs to be contextualized and put in perspective. What makes American business is entrepreneurship, venture capital. It is the fuel that makes America the best place to do business. We have the people in this nation with money who are willing to take risks. And we take risks more than any other nation on the planet. No one even close. And that has fueled our economic progress for well over a century. And that's what makes us awesome. This is the place to do business.
Yep.
It's why we've grown into this. Now, there are a great variety. Venture capital is a very broad term, but I'm not going to get into that because I think that's getting too technical. But what I will say is that in the case of Major League Gaming, Oak Investments is an example. They're about to cash out on one of their big cash cows. The Huffington Post was something that they invested in way back when. They're now going to get bought out by AOL for, I think...
oh, curious. I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're going to get bought out by AOL for $315 million. Ariana's going to take a position as AOL's editor-in-chief.
No, I read that. I didn't know that Oak had a position in them.
So, yeah, when you know the players involved, which is generally the case with most VC, it's about the people. Oak has their shit together, to make a long story. But I've always often attacked MLG in the same way you have. I've said, hey, what's the story? And what I like about Sundance is, he comes off the first time I met him as very humble and down to earth. And he realizes that this is where we're at and what we have to do. And I don't see them as in trouble, but I do see we can't do what Europe does. We can't do what South Korea does. I get incensed every time somebody tries to compare the EU or South Korea to North America. I think that has got to be one of the worst comparisons ever. And let me highlight why. The one truth about Americans as a whole is that, one, we get more homework than any other nation. Two, we have an enormous competition for our time. We right now are in a golden age of television. We have, I would argue, still the best film industry in the world. The amount of entertainment that we have available to us is really not equal anywhere else in the world. We tend to, unlike Europe, we get out of the house at a younger age. We certainly don't stay with our parents as long. So we become responsible and independent at a younger age. All of those things paint a very different story than what happens in South Korea. This is not offense to South Koreans, but they don't even pay their own military bill. We still have troops stationed there. Europe has been rebuilt by Americans. We are an industrious, and I'm not, this is not some like veiled nationalism here. I don't mean it to come across like that. I just want to be specific that when you see something work in another area, you have to be conscious that not every American finds gaming as valuable as they do all the other things that compete for their attention, from films to television to sports to even the way we do the news, to be honest. I mean, whoever knew that news and entertainment would blend in the way in the cable 24-hour news network? You take that all together and you see it's not one big challenge for our time in gaming. It's all these minuscule challenges. And what it paints for me is what you kind of talked about and what Jolly Matt agreed with, is that we will need to find more engaging ways to have spectators feel a part of what's going on. And if anything, the complexities, the EGs, I've always felt they will need to lose the cynicism and come into the arena realizing they too will need to generate and work toward gaining fans. We all need to do this together. I think Major League Gaming, I really do believe this. I call it our last best hope. I think that with the amount of venture capital tied in, from the right company too, don't forget. Oak Investment, as I said, is not, they are a player. They're a legitimate, thoughtful player. Sundance, a passionate person who I believe got a good education. He may not have an MBA, but I feel that over the last several years, he's gotten that MBA. He gets how it works. He knows what he needs to do. He has a vision as a CEO. He understands what's important to the community, and he's always looking to monetize it and then bring it to scale. And he gets all those things. So at the end of the day, I'm really confident in his ability because he gets that everything he tries, he's got to both do a trial and error like we did with the combines. It was an idea. He got Doritos involved. Didn't quite work out the way they had planned, and you move on. And that's what venture capital really is about. It's about the trust that the team and the vision and all the trial and error to figure out what all the revenue streams are that are going to make that work have to be put in play. Some things that are coming up this year that I think are going to help make that revenue model more clear is obviously a huge investment in streaming, which is going to be healthy. It's going to give us a lot of avenues. We're going to see probably a subscription wall, some kind of subscription wall or premium membership service come up in the summer for Game Battles and MLG, which will be good. That'll be another, source of revenue. Really encouraging people to create content and then help monetize that to allow those who create content to share in the revenue that content generates, which is going to be a really solid way for, I think, top content generators to both earn a living eventually and get recognized for their top content. So a lot of that is in play. And I think to anyone who comes into the space, and this is, again, not necessarily attack on you, but there are a lot of times that attitude you talk about, like, I was somebody in the PC world, and now, what does MLG know? Well, I don't know, but I know where their money comes from, and I know who those people are. I mean, you can go to the Oak Investment website. You can look at their portfolio. You can see the other companies they've invested in. This is all public information. You may know not how much they invested in each, but you get a good feel for it. I say there should be a lot less cynicism, and I'd love to see a lot more respect, understanding, involvement, engagement from the PC community. And I'm really hoping StarCraft 2 being on the circuit this year does that.
I do agree with what you just said, Jerry. Definitely people need to give MLG a chance. At the same time, I absolutely believe, like we've done on this show ourselves, I mean, it does need to be critiqued, though. And at all times, we need to be vigilant and aware of things that we find that could possibly improve the community for MLG as well as the events. And, you need a healthy discourse to be able to come up with these things. And that's why I think it's so valuable that people like Chris come out and raise the questions and ask, what's going on? I don't get it. I don't understand. I came to your event. It didn't speak to me. And it's important that people say these things so that MLG knows, hey, you're missing the ball. You're dropping the ball with a couple of different demos here. Some people aren't that into what you're doing. And I got to say, I like it. And I'll tell you what, as far as the whole venture capital thing goes, I started a business a couple of years ago. I just recently procured some money to expand my business to fix a division that's not working up to the levels I want it to. It doesn't necessarily mean the business is failing. It just means an aspect needs to be revamped, and I don't want to wait a year to have all the money come in so that I can do it. I want to keep moving and move forward so we can make more money over the same amount of time. So we don't have an insider look into the financials of MLG. We don't know if this $10 million is going towards some new aspect of the company or division or expansion that they think is going to come back and compound their revenues. But again, it's all speculation. We just don't know. But what we can say is how we feel about the events, how we feel as a spectator, how we feel as a participant. And I think that's where the insight and the valuable information that gets filtered through Sundance and his team, it's hopefully, and it seems like so far, I don't want to get ahead of myself, that they have been taking it to heart and working hard to rectify and make changes.
I got a few things to toss on that, if I could, because there was a lot of good points in all that all that you said right there, Jerry and Matt. I think the core qualm that I have that I wasn't really quite able to articulate yet with the amount of venture capital that was coming in is at some point the whole thing has to make money. It just has to. And my concern is just that I've seen the same sort of patterns in the PC world, and a lot of people were banking pretty hard on circuits like the CPL to be practically permanent and got torched. So I suppose I guess we've been over this to this point. That's the root of some of the cynicism. But at some point, the whole thing has to become profitable. If things are going really, really well and everything's really going great, there's not a whole lot of need for round after round after round of venture capital.
Well, I mean, I think that's a perspective. Each case is individual.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
no,
just
I agree.
speculating.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, so a lot of it is speculation, but I think it's worth mentioning that, it's really not entirely a sure thing at this point. And I think it's important to just keep a temperament on the perspective. I think there's a lot of things to be optimistic about that's been going on in MLG in recent memory, particularly since Sundance came back in on the reins. I think there's also some things that are cause to have a few reservations about, and the way that money is coming into the company is one of them. I think, in my opinion, your opinions about Sundance, I agree completely. I had particularly you were mentioning relations with 2-bit bloggers such as myself. I had a great chat with him earlier this evening. We talked for 30, 40 minutes or so, a little bit about the article, but not a lot. I just peppered him with a bunch of questions. I wanted to know more about him. I wanted to know his thoughts on some strategic direction on where he's going, and didn't get a chance to really dive in as much on funding as I really wanted to, but hopefully we'll be able to catch up a little more on that soon. But I did ask him, it's kind of a spoiler because I was going to post this all on my site, but what the hell. I asked him straight up, is MLG profitable today? And he said, no, it's not. But he thinks that what he's going to do with this recent round of VC over the course of this year will bring the company into a profitable position. It's basically what he said. And you know what? That in and of itself really tempered a lot of the concern that I had about it, simply because it was so straightforward, the answer. And it's not, it's like, okay, everything's not really going wonderfully with the business model we have now, but we're going to make changes that we think is going to turn this around, and we're going to see where we are at the end of next year. So that's what he projects, and only time will tell at this point.
Absolutely.
He's been talking about the changes, and I listened in on the 2 podcasts that you had in the last few months where you had Sundance on. I listened to him. You linked me to him. I listened. I did my homework, and there were a lot of good things going on there. And in general, like I still have my reservations about the whole business model, but I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to play wait and see at this point and see what's going on. And my role as I see it, as somebody who writes about the gaming scene, is not necessarily to be a cheerleader, but to bring up things that I find to be concerning and see if anybody shares the opinion. So I'm going to keep doing that, and I think I'm anticipating just as much where this all goes as all of you. I'm certainly not rooting for it to fail.
Well, that's good. There's a reason I call it our last best hope, and that is because it's not profitable yet. I mean, that's been one of my critiques for the last couple of years. But the best thing to happen to Major League Gaming is for Sundance to step back into this role. And I think his straightforwardness creates, to me, an atmosphere, an environment that allows entrepreneurs as myself to collaborate with him, to help in the way that we can, by giving players an identity, by creating a community. As Matt said, he probably would have had a similar experience that you did at MLG if he had not met VVV Gaming. And that is where we probably differ greatly from the old model is because, on the console side, you can't just take 2 or 3 top players, kick back and say, we're number one. You absolutely have to build a fan base. That's where you're going to get your traffic. That's where you're going to get your future players. It's where you're going to get the kind of exposure that's good. And along the way, our model is radically different from anyone I've ever seen, but it works really well. And I had somebody once ask, you were so critical of Major League Gaming, and now all of a sudden you're not. I said, well, because Sundance broke that ice. He came and spoke, and I still have the same concerns you do, Chris. It's not profitable yet. They have borrowed a lot, and they, will either succeed or fail. And when it fails, if it does, which I don't hope it does, like I said, last best hope, then we'll play in ESCA and we'll probably tournaments ourselves and we'll move on and there'll be another American failure, but
sure.
I do think this is our last best hope. I think this has got the greatest potential for success because there are a lot of smart people, but we do have an enormous challenge, as I said earlier, and that is how do you get people to enjoy spectating video games, feel a part of this when there are so many challenges?
Well, it took professional football how many years to even become a viable professional sport? 60,
yeah, it was,
50?
Yeah.
And it took them 100 years to eclipse baseball. So, I think probably what we've kind of touched on, one of the common threads all night has been, I think electronic gamers just expected everything to come as a natural progression overnight. And I think we're learning right now that when you're dealing with business, not just hopes and dreams of gaming stardom, it is more of a grassroots campaign, and it is more of building the building blocks first. You can't just jump right in with both feet like CGS did or the others, and you learn from the mistakes. And quite frankly, country of entrepreneurs, but 90% of new business ideas still fail. Every day,
absolutely,
they fail. And it's a battle. And there's a rule of thumb in the business I'm in. I'm in nightlife. And they say the first year you lose money, the second year you hope to break even, and the third year you hope to make a small profit. So MLG's 5 years in. Sundance took back over a year ago, year and a half ago. It changes everything. It's a battle, especially in this economy right now. It's a battle. And if that investment gets them over the hump, I think we're all rooting for them and we're all happy, because I agree with what Jerry said, particularly coming from the downtrodden PC side where we've watched league after league fail. Something's got to give eventually. Something's going to happen. It'll happen. It's just we have to be patient and hope that MLG has done a good job of branding itself and presenting itself to a large demographic of gamers. So hopefully they're the ones to kind of pioneer into the future, because there is so much, not just capital-wise, but I think hopes and dreams of console players, PC players now, and just the gaming community in general, that I really, really hope it pulls through, just so that we can all kind of rally behind a common banner and move this thing along. We don't need another 5 or 6 or 7 years of waiting for the next one to step up.
And like most hopes, I would like to hope that this show could continue and this dialogue can continue. But Chris, we've come to the end of this segment, so I want to personally thank you so much for being a guest on your show, and give you the opportunity to give any shout-outs or tell people where you write, and if they want to follow your opinion pieces, where they should go.
Thanks very much for having me on, guys. It was an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate not being a punching bag. Although, that was a joke. That was a joke. I didn't expect to be. But
don't worry, we're going to talk about you when you're not here. As soon as we get you off the air, we're just going to scream you out for 30 minutes. We're going to edit everything you set out. But thanks for coming on, man.
No, it was a lot of fun, and anytime you'd like to have me back, I'll be sure to make room. In any case, I'll try not to be that much of a self-promotional shill, so I'll keep it short. You can follow me on Twitter at KeekerDC, KeekRDC, and pretty much everything I'm doing on the webs gets posted there in one way, shape, or form. So that's the best way to go.
All right, so all our Twitter followers, give that one more time, Chris.
KeekRDC, KeekerDC.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Hope that you have enjoyed the 54th round of VV Gaming's The Losers Bracket. I'd like to give a big shout out to the VV sponsors: SteelSeries, Control Freak, MuseSkins.com, GamerLogos.net, Custom Ink, and of course a big shout out to the band Power Glove for supplying our theme music. In addition, big thanks to our community. We love your feedback, love your support. Be sure to stop by our podcast homepage, vvgaming.podbean.com. Also, you can subscribe to VV Gaming on iTunes to follow both of our shows. That's Directional Influence, our Smash Brothers podcast, and The Losers Bracket, which you are, of course, listening to right now. Feel free to email us at thelosersbracket@vv-gaming.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, where we are simply known as Losers Bracket. In addition, if you guys get the chance and you are a fan of rhythm gaming, I personally have made a thread over on the Score Hero forums. You can get a link to it from our rhythm gaming forums at the VV Gaming site. I have personally made a thread detailing some rules that I have put together for a potential MLG event. We'd love your feedback on any ideas, concerns, questions, anything. If you get the chance, check it out. It'd mean a lot to me and the entire rhythm gaming community. We appreciate it.
In addition, Amped Roar, you're not good, kid.
First of all, don't use my words. Amp, don't listen to any of them. Not any of them. Because I don't think you're not good quite covers how bad you really are, to be honest. I think it goes far deeper than that. But yeah, this has been a great show. I want to thank everybody here for their participation. A shout out to everybody in the Ref Guild, all of you. It was been an amazing journey so far. Made so many new friends, and I can't wait to the next beta starts next Tuesday. So look forward to it.
We'll see you next week, guys. Have a good one.